And I was curious, so I did a little bit of background research, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I have some insane facts here that I pulled together. So, born in South Africa in 1981, world champion skydiver, wind tunneler, camera flyer with over 13,000 jumps.
Yeah, you're about 99% right with the background check. So good job on that. The internet's got some dirt on me, it looks like.
So
uh,
that 13,000 jumps was, I think I read that a few years back.
yeah, it's a
What?
17,000 plus now.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
17,000 plus.
Yeah.
That's wild. So with everything going on in the world, are you in the air at all right now? You mentioned you're
Yeah.
paragliding.
Yeah, actually, we're back to our normal activity, let's say, but the activity is by no means where it was before. Mostly just due to, I think, a few factors, and I'd just like to take a step back on what you said. It's
Sure.
really cool to engage in this conversation because lots of people's like passion and livelihoods, which are in my case like pretty much the same thing, that they become quite affected, because of the lockdown, the shutdown, and all of that. So yeah, we've started again. Let's say like the operational side is working. And then there is definitely some activity, but a lot of my students, a lot of my clients are traveling to me. So it's still a little bit uncertain in the moment. So like, but with inside of that, I've had a few people who kind of weren't planning to come to Spain and train with me that have now had some availability, and myself too. So we kind of, it's gaining some traction again, but I think like the more kind of Zen state you can find yourself in these days, the easier it's going to be. Just an acceptance and exercising a lot of patience, right? Like that's something that doesn't necessarily come very naturally to me. I like to do the things that I want to do straight away or get them done. And this is just not kind of panning out for 2020. So yeah, there's some personal growth there, right? Like I've just been wearing a different hat and just, which I do need to because I don't have a lot of hair anyway, but or any. But no, I just, I'm happy for everything right now, like I always have been. But regardless of what the rhythm of my work is right now, I'm just stoked to be back in the sky. And like also like it's the community that I felt like I missed a lot. We have such an amazing sense of community in skydiving. So just being able to be back at the drop zone and hanging out with my people and doing like a little bit of jumping feels like such a gift right now. So I'm really happy that things have started up again.
So is the main limiter the fact that you said people are traveling to you from all over the world or Spain, what have you? Or is it when you're actually there in the drop zone, there's a limit as to how many people can be in the plane or on site, things like that?
No, not really. Like Spain started up again, like let's say with operation in pretty much the same place that we kind of stopped. But yes, the main thing for me right now is just a lot of my personal work is not guaranteed to happen just because of the travel restrictions, So,
Right.
yeah, that's pretty much the case. It's mostly international students that I'm working with. So people are coming from whether it be Hong Kong, China, or even though we're in Europe, but like someone traveling from France is still an international trip, So that's still kind of got to get back to where it was before. But like I said, it's just quite a dynamic situation right now. Things are moving so fast that you just got to kind of go with the flow and just be ready to make the changes that need to be made.
Right. And so you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to put it in very plain English for people who especially aren't in the skydiving community. You could be considered a full-time skydiver.
Yeah, I am actually. I have
Which,
been.
yeah, most people probably don't even know that's a thing. They think
Yeah,
that's a hobby exclusively.
yeah, that's a very good point. Like there's a lot of people, if you say that you work as a full-time skydiver, they don't really understand how, and that's quite natural. Because it's not a really easily accessible sport, let's say, for many reasons. But yeah, I have been a full-time skydiver since 2003. I started right on the bottom of the pecking order,
Right.
and just I believe worked hard and a little bit obsessively. and just slowly started to climb that sportive ladder, let's say.
Yep.
And yeah, I work for myself right now, so I'm not employed by any one person or company, and I look after my own company basically, which is myself, you know. So yes, I'm a full-time skydiver, a professional skydiver, and a competitor too.
Okay, so let's bring it way back. Growing up in South Africa, what does it look like from A to Z? So what was that like, your childhood, your family, friends, things like that?
Well, like to be honest, like I had a pretty much a fairy tale childhood. Mom and dad still together now, like amazing parents, lots of love for myself and my sisters, and for each other. And when I was growing up in South Africa, I was born into apartheid South Africa, so quite an interesting political situation. And during my like preteen years was the abolishment of apartheid, so we started to get yeah, a little bit more racial integration into society, but there was still a bit of a hangover from apartheid, which there still is now, but things have changed. So it's difficult as a kid to really understand that, because you're just born into the world, and what you see and what you do is completely normal. So from my perspective, my childhood was really really awesome, and I feel quite privileged to have grown up in South Africa, because we spent a lot of our time outdoors, whether it was surfing or cruising around on beaches or doing camping missions, or whatever activity you could possibly dream of is accessible in South Africa. And another thing that was definitely a huge contributing factor to why I'm talking to you today is because my parents owned a drop zone when I was really young.
Okay.
So I spent my childhood looking at parachutes, and like just couldn't wait till I was old enough to jump, basically.
Wow. So
And,
did your sisters have the same sort of view you did as well? They wanted to get into it?
yeah, my elder sister, she ended up doing a couple hundred jumps, and my younger sister did a few tandems, and my mom and dad were both active skydivers. So pretty much the whole family got into it in some way or the other, but I'm like the last man standing there, the one who didn't want to let it go or kind of grow out of the sport. I ended up just growing into the sport, you know, and it became my profession. And it's until this point now, the only profession I've actually followed.
Okay. I also read something that I think most people will find tremendously interesting, that I read that you had your first tandem at age 10. Is that true?
Yeah, that's completely true. I'd already wanted to do it for years before, and I was hanging out with my family at a drop zone, and at some point in the afternoon, I was just like, oh, let's go back to the hotel, and like I can go swimming, or just you know, go play video games in the arcades back in those days in the early 90s, you know, go play Pac-Man or Street Fighter.
Yep.
And which was actually quite weird for me to have the desire to leave the drop zone, because it's a place that I've found really a lot of happy moments in. But anyway, then my father, like, he said, yeah, okay, cool. Just give me a few minutes. And then he went to speak to the chief instructor and like safety officer. And he said, do you think we could get Will to do a tandem? And they were like, yes. So my dad came back and said, yeah, cool. I can take you back to the hotel to go like play around, or you can do a tandem. And I was like, okay, no, but then that changes the game, you know? I was like, okay, well, then we're just going to stay at the drop zone. And yeah, it's that's going back 28 years, you know? So it's it's a lifetime ago, but I still remember the jump as if it was yesterday.
So what is that process like? I guess you said you just talked to the safety officer and the head instructor, but in skydiving, is there any kind of like rules with ages or experience to do tandem at that point?
That's a very good question. There is, and it's pretty much according to the nation that you are jumping in, let's say, and the rules of that skydiving federation. And in South Africa at that time, and I believe it is now, very similar. I'm not sure if there's an age limit, but I fit in the harness. You know, there was no risk of me falling out, and I had shown tremendous interest in the sport already. When my dad and mom asked for my permission, it was to people that I'd already been annoying with, like trying to teach me things by the age of 10, you know? So they were like, okay, like this is not going to go away. So let's let's get him in the sky, get him a tandem, and then let's see where that goes, you know? And then that was just the first drop of the waterfall.
Yeah. And I think something a lot of people don't realize is that both with scuba diving and skydiving, like these sports have been around for a really long time. They're tremendously safe.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I did my open water one when I was 15 also. So I'm a scuba diver myself. And yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to, for sure, like my childhood was pretty epic. You know, I was just spent tons of time in the sea and and in the air and in drop zones and then hanging out in nature. And yeah, and so, you know, if you go back 28 years, just as a kind of a benchmark of time, which I can remember really well, like the sport is totally different. It's become a lot safer. And one of the biggest contributing factors to that is the mindset has changed, you know, potentially, well, I could say in the 80s and 90s that I could remember, it was some of the old school guys, it was kind of cool to be a little bit reckless, you know, that was the thing. And, you know, try scare yourself or scare others. And that was just like laughed at, you know, but my generation, that's like seriously uncool, you know, like now, whatever we can do to just make things safer and do things more correctly, that's the new cool, you know.
Yeah.
And that was installed in me at a young age, and I definitely like to believe that I carry on with that mindset, and then I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to teach that mindset, you know. So within any type of potentially high risk environment, the safer we can make it and the more we can mitigate that risk, the more fun we can have and the more we can focus on the things that we're trying to do, you know. So for me, I really like to perform. I like to perform myself. I like to perform as a teacher, and I like to bring out the highest potential in the people that I work with, you know. So if I'm worrying about simple safety aspects that are not taken care of by myself or with the equipment or from my student or on an operational side, then it's very simple. Like we just have to reduce the amount of performance, or which will eventually go down to zero, right? If I don't like the way that things are going down or things don't look safe, then we just stop the show and we wait until things are correct, and then we get on with it, you know. So yeah, the sport has definitely changed like a lot in the past 38 years, 28 years, and it's definitely become a lot safer. And a lot of that is also due to the advancements of the technology, right? Like from our rigs to our audible altimeters to the canopies to the aircraft, et cetera, et cetera.
It's interesting that you say the mindset of what's cool has changed. I definitely see that myself. As a bit of a younger guy, my dad is actually the one who got me into all of these sports. He was the scuba diver, the skydiver, you know, like as a kid growing up, similar to you, right? When you've got parents like that, like yours who owned a drop zone, they're like, wow, like they're superheroes. And you sort of say, well, how do you do that? Like, that's something you kind of just see or hear about. You don't really think it's possible. And they're like, well, Will, Ryan, just do it. So that, similar to you, I get the mindset of always wanting to be go, go, go. But the reason I mentioned that is when I talked to my dad about what it was like to scuba dive and skydive back in, oh geez, like late 70s, early 80s for him, he would tell me how they would scuba dive into shipwrecks super deep in Lake Ontario. They'd bring a beer and they'd go up in an air pocket, like drink the beer underwater and then go back out. Yeah, and you're hearing this, I'm like, wow, like that's so cool. And now that I've gone through the course, I'm like, holy shit, like, that's crazy. Like the stuff he tells me. So that's so interesting.
But
So
I think too, I think like our parents' generation was one of the first generations to have access to these sports in a similar way that we do.
yeah,
So they kind of had to write the rule book of how we end up performing today, you know, like all of the mistakes that were made back then. I take a lot of reference from aviation in general. Almost all the time, any kind of rule that's in place or
yep,
safety system that's been developed has been put there because of something that has happened, right? So like something silly, I can't think of an example, but let's say you have to wear a helmet at this point. It's not just because people want you to wear a helmet. It's because at that point in the jump, that's when something can happen. Or this is why you have this extra clip. Yeah, we're back. We're back. We're back.
So you were saying like the extra clip, the extra harness.
Yeah, I mean, you know, or like it's a lot of like I take a reference back to aviation, you know, like a lot of the safety systems that have been put in place are to reduce the possibility of somebody making the same mistake that was a lot of the time fatal, you know. So like just to close up on that, like our parents' generation, like they possibly didn't know that drinking a beer in an air pocket and going into a shipwreck without some kind of cord to find your way out, or pulling your parachute really low, or etc. etc. They were just that was the norm, you know. But after a lot of learning, now we've realized we don't want to make those same mistakes because that's just totally unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me about your early days solo in the sport. So you grew up South Africa, your parents had the drop zone, you did your tandem at age 10. At what point did you start getting into it on your own accord?
Um, yeah, like my parents sold the drop zone when I was about 13, and then we moved to Cape Town.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I was a little bit less on the drop zone, but the fire was still burning inside of me. And then in South Africa, to start doing your AFF course, you need to be 16 years old. But I really wanted to do it. And because I had grown up in the sport, and I knew already at that stage a lot of the decision makers, and so did my family, they asked if it would be possible for me to do AFF at the age of 15.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I got a special permission to start AFF early, and the South African, the Skydiving Association was the Parachute Association of South Africa. The safety and training officer was a very influential man in my life. His name's Anton Scalabrino. He recently passed away, so bless him. And he said to my parents, no problem if Will does AFF, as long as I'm his instructor. And that was down the road from where we lived. So he ended up being my AFF instructor, which I'm forever grateful for, because he's one of the most influential skydivers on the continent of Africa. So like, you know, in hindsight, like at the time, I would have done it with anybody, but I'm so glad that he stood up and said he wanted to do it with me, because he ended up seeing my progression in the sport, and he ended up coming to Spain with his son, and we were like sharing some beautiful moments together. So yeah, that's pretty much the story of how I started jumping solo.
That's amazing. So you're 15, you're jumping solo, you've presumably got a few years under your belt, and you're approaching 20, sort of the point when most people are going to decide college, university, what am I going to do with my life?
Mm-hmm.
How do you take that jump to start the path of where you are today?
Yeah, that's a really cool question, and I'm glad you asked that, because it was definitely pretty much like that. You know, at the same time that I'm really passionate about flying, I have a really keen interest in design. And at school, I was big into my art and design, and my parents were pretty insistent on me getting a tertiary education. So I took 1 year off school, and then I enrolled for an industrial design course, a 3 year course, diploma at the University of the University of Technology in Cape Town. So I went on to finish my diploma in industrial design, 3 year course, and that was kind of the trickiest moment for me, because I had really enjoyed the course, and something again that I'm passionate about. So I believe also that I did relatively well in the course, and I could have gone far in that industry, and I was definitely seriously considering that. It was like, cool, so like I know what I really want to do is that follow my deep passion, but at the same time, should I just go and get a job in industrial design, or start my own company and start producing some cool products that can be helpful? And that was the moment that my parents said to me, well, you asking us the question, but you already know the answer, you know? So,
Wow.
yeah, so I just listened to that, which was basically me. And that was a very nice reassurance from my parents that I should really just go and do what I needed to do. Which basically meant at that stage in my life, like leaving my family behind, and I was in a relationship too, so I had to split up with my girlfriend more or less, and I moved to Spain with big dreams, like high hopes, and not a clue how I was going to get it done, you know.
What?
Yeah. So I just took a huge leap there, and yeah, it came with a few emotional price tags, but I don't know what in life doesn't, you know. And
Yeah,
definitely was without a doubt the best decision I could have made for my life and for my career.
that's wild. So your parents don't even really give you an answer. They're like, Will, you know the answer. You
Yeah,
don't even necessarily 100% know what you need to do, but you leave home, go to Spain, break up with your girlfriend at the time, and basically reset to zero.
yeah. I arrived with
Wow.
like a little bag with my rig in it and a little backpack. And I think at the time it was like 1,200 euros, you know, which was like the most cash I had in my bag ever.
Oh man.
Uh, yeah, and then like now I turn around and I look at all of the things that have happened in my life, and now you know, I have my life really well set up in Spain, you know. And it's not an easy task for a South African, because on top of all of this is a whole nother level of the game, is that the South African passport is not the easiest passport to travel with. So
Oh,
yeah, like you need visas for everywhere. So the only way for me to get legal in Spain at that time was for me to basically claim amnesty. So I lived there illegally for 4.5 years, declared to be living there in a
right.
legal registry, but not there legally to work, you know. And then after that 4-year amnesty period, then if you get a proposal from a company to work in a contract, an offer of work, then you can get legalized, or whatever they call it.
Right.
So that happened to me. So then I started my process of like legally immigrating into Spain. And now this year because the first few years I just went for a season, and then I came back to South Africa, went back. So I spent like 3 years like going there and coming back, but always with my head there. And then I started my process, and now in 2020 I can apply for my citizenship in Spain.
All the
So
years
that's something.
later.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So now, like, you know, that's something that I've achieved uh, for myself with a lot of support from very dear people close to me. A lot of that came from my family and my friends and my fiance right now. But, you know, like, that's a super important thing for me too, because once I get my citizenship in Europe, it's a huge game changer for me. It like makes all of my international travel a lot easier, and gives me a couple extra options, I believe, for what I want to do with my life and my lifestyle.
That's incredible. So we're gonna come back to that point. So
Oh,
the future, but I want to go back to when you first went to Spain. So
uh-huh.
you show up with, you know, like roughly 1,300 euros, a backpack, and your skydiving rig.
Yeah.
Quite the epic ensemble. So
Uh-huh.
what do you do? What's step one when you get to Spain?
Yeah, like it's there's actually another funny story there. My late uncle, who recently passed away, another very influential person in my life. I told him this, that I was going to Spain, and I think I was 20. The first time I went across, I was 22, and he's like, "What do you mean going to Spain?" Like he's got a company. He had a company at the time that was trading in fish. So they would buy fish from boats that are out at sea, and then bring them into South Africa, and then export the fish around the world. And he said to me, "Yes, well, we send a plane twice a week to Spain, full of fish. You can go in the cargo plane as a passage."
No.
Yeah. So I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "That sounds so epic, you know." So I hung out like at my aunt and uncle's place in Johannesburg, waiting for them to say like, get to the airport now. That ended up being a couple weeks. So I jumped on this cargo plane, a 747, full of fish and flowers, and we stopped in Lusaka in the middle of Africa in Zambia and picked up flowers, and then we flew on to Spain, and we landed in this airport, Zaragoza, which is like a big military airport, but it's not like Madrid or Barcelona, which brings passengers on. So this cargo plane pulls up, and they're like, okay, Rad, here's the cargo plane that comes twice a week. And then there's this young South African kid who like walks off the plane and goes into immigration. And the guy's like, what are you doing here? Like, where did you come from? And I pointed at the plane, didn't speak a stitch of Spanish.
Right.
And I just remembered from the films, like saying no comprendo, which doesn't even really mean anything.
Right.
But I just kept on saying that to the immigration lady, and she checked my passport. I had the visa. So she was like, well, cool, this is legit, stamped me, and I went through. And then I took a train down to Barcelona, and I found a buddy of mine, Luis, who I'd known from America. And I was like, hey, bro, how do I get to Empuria? He told me how to get there. And I just took a train, and I rocked up there. And then he very kindly put me up in his place. And I just started from there, trying to build a relationship with the drop zone. But I mean, arriving there as a young kid, not really knowing anybody besides one person, it was pretty tricky, but I definitely pulled it off, I think.
So what are the sort of progression steps between then and now? So you're getting to know people at the drop zone. I imagine at first you're just jumping. Like you just go there and you're jumping at the drop zone. Like, how do you start making money at this point?
Yeah, I wish it wasn't even that simple. I was a kid, like early 20s, and the money that I brought across to jump, I ended up needing to buy it's called a Cypress. It's like this unit, a digital unit that activates your reserve if you get knocked unconscious or you can't activate it yourself. And I went to the local rigger, who's the guy who maintains the equipment, and he said, look, you need to get one of these. And he said, what's your plan? And I said, I'm going this direction. He goes, cool, just buy a brand new one. So it was like all my money. So I ended up having to spend all of the money I'd brought across on like an essential piece of equipment, which obviously no regrets. And then I was just like hanging around doing my best that I could do to get in the sky. So I started actually working on the ground at the drop zone, like cutting the grass and cleaning the pool.
Oh my God. So not even remotely related to skydiving.
No. Yeah, like I was there and I was stoked, to be working for the drop zone, but nothing near where I wanted to be in terms of like working in the sky, let's say. And then like the next season, I got a job. Well, that same season, I was packing for a couple of the local instructors in the free fly school, which I eventually became a part of and represented them in competition. And so I was packing for them, and I was like, oh, this is a bit more my vibe, like having contact with the people and the equipment. And then came back the next season, and then I worked as a packer for the whole season. And then I was like, okay, rad, but like this goes a little bit far from my original intention. Like I want to be working in the sky. So I met a buddy at the time, an English guy who was living in Jersey in the Channel Islands between France and the UK. And he said, why don't you come back to the island with me in the winter? I'll get you a job in construction, and we'll come back with like, at that time, like loads of money, and we can just go for it. And I was like, wow, that sounds cool. But like, I've never been in such a cold place in my life. So I was like, let's do it. So we spent the whole winter there, and I was working on a construction site during the day and doing a couple bar shifts at night, like super humble life, like just grafting as much as I could, stashing money away. And then I ordered a new rig and a new canopy and a whole bunch of equipment. And then we went back the next season, and then it was a total game changer. Then I had actually some money. We paid 6 months rent of the apartment. I sold the old rig I had brand new equipment. I had some money, and I went to the drop zone as if it was my job, but just jumping. I'll be there at first load and stay right to the end, and just like paying for my jumps. And then, then it kind of slowly started working out. Like then the chief, the boss of the camera team, which is filming the tandems, he was like, because we had also set ourselves up with the equipment to be ready to do that job, because that was our target. And then he saw that, and we made it very clear that we were there to do that. And then he said, hey, maybe you guys can help out a couple days or one day. And then we did it, and the job was acceptable. And then he said, hey, next week, a couple more. And within a few months, we were like full on in the team. And then I did like 1,000 jumps in that 6 month period.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then that really was a huge catalyst for me, and then I went back the next season, and then that's when I decided to stay full time. And as I knew that that would be a 4-year period where I couldn't leave Spain, I was like, right. So this time in my like early 20s, like I can get away with this. So I just went like 100% saturation into the sport,
Yeah.
and I just did absolutely nothing for 4 years besides eat, breathe, and dream about skydiving, you know. And so I got to invest a lot of time and a lot of energy into skydiving then. And then I started to do free flying. Well, I'd already been doing it, but I was doing a little bit more, and started to learn a bit more. And then I started to do a little bit of coaching with some people coming around to the drop zone. And then eventually one of the owners of the free fly school at the time, he said to me, hey, but why don't you do that like kind of under our wing, you know, and then we'll teach you, and then you're working with us, and we get on. So I was like, okay, rad. And then I did that parallel with my camera job, which was my bread and butter, let's say, for a few years. And then at some point, like I actually, this would have been like my late 20s, no, actually early 30s. I was like having a bit of an internal conversation with myself, and I was like, it reaches a point now where it's too much of the same thing. So I want to do something different in the sport. And then the moment arose for me to join the competition team. So just after the financial crisis, the last one, I quit my job on a contract. I remember phoning my dad and telling him I was going to do that so I could compete. He thought I was completely out of my mind. I had a secure job. He's like, "You're going to do what?" And I was like, "Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm going to do it." And I spent like 6 or 7 months just training full time. A lot of sponsorships from the drop zone and from the leading manufacturers that were giving us a lot of support, as they have continued to. And we ended up going to the World Championships in 2012. And first we went to the National Championships in France because I represented France, and we won. And then we went to the World Championships in Dubai in 2012, got third place. It was absolutely heartbreaking because I was going to win, you know, but
Yeah.
a little bit of an optimistic dream in your first international competition. And then from that point forward, I got approached by my teammate, Johan Abbey, who we went on to perform in freestyle for 4 years together. And I think we did like 13 competitions, and we just lost one.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had an insane run there with him. And then pretty much as I got into that team with the freestyle, I had some really awesome mentors in the sport who helped me look at things in a different way, and made me look at it in an even more professional way that I had. And then on the work side, it just really started working out. And ever since then, I've been very fortunate to be in a really great position, working with amazing people, amazing collaborations with the top names in the sport, working with the best equipment manufacturers, and basically just haven't stopped having an absolute blast, you know.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like I sometimes feel guilty. I'm like, what do you mean this is my job? Like, that's the thing I miss the most about being in the confinement, you know. It was like, because when we got out of it and I jumped, I was like, this is definitely my thing, you know. Like, this is something that I love so much, and it's for me still, time after time, like the most pleasure I can get of doing an activity, and at the same time, it's my job, you know. So it was really interesting. It was a really interesting experience to not be able to practice that sport,
Right.
and to still be convinced that it's what you want to do, and then to all of a sudden have it back in your hands and start again and go like, okay, but yes, you know. So so that's going pretty much from the time I went to Spain till like post lockdown, you know.
So I think there's an important piece of information we have to talk about, and that's skydiving isn't a singular thing. There's many different disciplines in skydiving. So I know a little bit because I'm interested in it and I want to do it, but you would obviously be able to describe this much better. So off the top of my head, there is base jumping, wingsuiting, belly flying, which is what most people know to be skydiving, just falling face down, and then your sort of world of free flying among many others. So what are the differences there?
I mean, you've also just scratched the surface on the
Yep.
disciplines, you know, like you have so many fractions of, let's say skydiving, but as a purist skydiver, they're almost not even skydiving. But let's say you have the base jump inside, which has got like a classic base jumping in slick, and then you've got wingsuit flying, and then you've got all the other mountain associated type of flying that you can jump out of a paraglider. And have some buddies who flew back into a plane and do some really crazy stunts. And then they got Jetman going. So that's like a whole nother fraction of the sport. And then within skydiving, you've got sports skydiving, civilian skydiving, military skydiving, and then you have accuracy, and you have a canopy piloting. Inside of canopy piloting, there's 4 disciplines. So there's a bunch of different stuff going on in the sport. Like basically, in a nutshell, you've got sports related to flying your body, and then you've got a whole bunch. Disciplines related to flying your body, and then you've got disciplines which are related to flying your canopy. So, and then inside of that, there's many different layers also, you know. And then there's some crossover between many things that you can do off, let's say, a big cliff with a wingsuit. There's a crossover to the sky. So some people use the sky as a training ground so they can get competent with their equipment, and then they choose to go to the mountain. So, I mean, the main differences is I think you're basically going to find what really gets you going in the sport. And a lot of the time it's going to be from the human connections you make along the way, right? Imagine you do AFF and you end up doing it with someone who comes from a heavy background in gymnastics. And then the guy's like, man, I really want to be able to jump out and do like all of my acrobatic tricks in the sky. And that guy would fit into the box of being related to similar principles of freestyle or free flying. Or perhaps you have a guy who has a heavily weighted background in paragliding, and he's dreaming to get the experience and the skill to be able to fly high performance parachutes because he wants to become a swooper, etc., etc. So I could speak about the disciplines that would have to be a whole nother session, you know. There's too many, and there's too much going on with inside of them.
So that's a good transition though into what you do, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but that could be called like free flying, correct? Yeah. So explain what that means. So I'm a person who knows very little about skydiving. What is exactly what you're doing in the air that is professional versus, say, like the wingsuiting or something else?
But don't get me wrong. Like there's professional wingsuit pilots, there's professional base jumpers, professional swoopers.
Yes. But you as a professional free flyer.
Yeah. So to describe my discipline, it's a discipline that's it's a free fall discipline underneath the governing body. In by definition, it is a discipline that you are performing with your body, right? Like the canopy, the parachute is just there to get you back to the ground. So it's a free fall discipline. And with inside of that, like we're moving through the 3 dimensions, where it's different to being on your belly, where you're just like kind of cruising down on your belly and free flying. You can fly head down, head up in angles, head down in angles, head up, and then moving through those axes all the time. That's when things become quite interesting. So it's they call it the artistic events because there is free fly and freestyle. Again, by definition of competition, I will bring that up a few times because it's something that I did for a few years. Like a free flight team consists of three performers. Basically, it's 2 people in front of the camera and 1 person behind the camera. And then a freestyle team are 2 performers, 1 in front of the camera, 1 behind. So the difference between those 2 disciplines is that the freestyle is a little bit more dynamic, a little bit faster, and there's a little bit more, let's say, gymnastic orientated style of flying, a little bit more acro, and some interesting artistic merit. And then in free fly, it's very similar, but it's a little bit more about the 3-way interaction and the way that you look on the camera in the past, at least, didn't need to be as clean as freestyle. But they're underneath the same umbrella. Even though, like, if I'm teaching someone with my freestyle background, I'm probably still going to teach them majority of the stuff orientated to free flying, and then we're going to add the freestyle elements.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure if I explained the answer very well, but that's the way that
I think you did, and I think you summarized it really good at the beginning. Like, in its most simple form, it looks to the average person like gymnastics in the sky.
Yeah, and like, then even with inside free fly now, like, one of the biggest disciplines is angle flying. So that's how we all put ourselves in formation. Like, either you can have dudes on their belly and on the back, and then you build a beautiful formation that's slot specific. And then with inside of that formation, you can do like banking turns. You can go through the vertical axis. You can go in the horizontal axis and carve. So, but one of the hugest waves of flying right now with inside of free fly is angle flying, which is almost a sub-discipline of free flying.
Okay, interesting. One thing that I find to be particularly neat about what you do, based on my initial research, which I was really unaware of free flying and freestyle before getting to talk to you, is that you are quite literally in the air with just whoever is performing and then the camera person. So to me, in my mind, I'm like, oh, so the person who's judging you is not there. They're on the ground. They're going to watch the video after. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It must be so important for that camera person to just absolutely nail it as much as the person in front of the camera.
Yeah. One of my big mentors in the sport put it so beautifully simple. He said, if you're not on the stage, it's going to be difficult for the crowd to see your performance.
Right.
So the camera flyer is providing your stage. And if you imagine, if you're watching any type of performance on stage, whether it be an opera or a ballet, it's epic, but you're sitting in a chair and you're not moving. But if you are, like, if that stage is moving in a three-dimensional, in 3 dimensions all the time, it becomes tremendously challenging to make sure that the performer is there. And there needs to be a real communication between the two of you. But some people might argue that the job of the camera flyer is even more important than the performer. I'm not going to get into that conversation now, but that's just to give you an idea of how far you can go with the importance of the camera flyer. The same as in a belly skydive, right? The guys who filming competition or performing the classic belly, there's some amazing teams out there, like the big legends are a Belgian team, Hayabusa, some friends of mine. But if the camera guy's on top filming them and he decides to have a look at the view over there and move his head, and these guys do like 5 formations, then there's 5 points that this guy misses. So but yeah, there is not really one of the two roles which are more important. It's an amazing cohesion. But if you ask me as a camera flyer, I would have to say camera flyers are more important than performers.
So you went there.
Yeah, exactly. But that'll be the second version of the podcast.
So what's next for you? So now we've gone from A to Z, growing up in South Africa, to being in Spain and being a total professional performing and competing. What's the future? I read you have a foundation and a number of other projects that you work on as well.
Yeah, that's I'm really happy you asked that question too. You know, like, chasing your dreams and going as far as you can with whatever objectives you set out is tremendously rewarding. And I think you need to do that with a big heart, a lot of compassion, control your emotion and have a rational mind. But at the same time, like, it becomes a little bit of a selfish journey too. So over time, what I was doing for myself started to be not enough. So I've had some really amazing people around me my whole life, and the past few years, some incredible partnerships. And one that's like seriously noteworthy is my partner in the foundation and one of my greatest friends, Allegra Nassi. We were traveling around the world, living the dream, going to some incredible locations, seeing how far we could go around the world and find the most incredible locations. And we always did it with the right heart and the right message. But at the same time, we were like, how can we do something more? How can we give back? And we were always trying to find local people that needed a bit of a hand and give them a hand, even if it was just give them a gift of a jump or reach out to them. And we decided to form the Carol Foundation, which has been a really interesting journey. And it's working with industry-related concepts, let's say. And right now, our biggest thing that we're driving is the carbon offsetting, because our sport has a little bit of a messy kind of, like activity. It's a little bit of a dirty activity, let's say, in terms of that. Like, you're not paragliding or mountaineering, you are burning fuel to do it. So we've been really encouraging the carbon offsetting. And it's a very exciting time now because we're just about to get electric aircraft in skydiving.
Mm-hmm.
That's just about to happen. And at the same time, like, we've had some amazing people who've come on board and who've started similar initiatives. We also we have some other actions, they call, that we're working on. The one is to have a fund ready for when people do get injured, because that's life, that's the sport, so that we can have some funds ready to help people as a kind of a gesture, you know, like, it's not going to change their situation or perhaps pay all of their bills, and it's not a substitute for an insurance. It's just a gesture, a symbolic gesture to help out when people have been seriously injured or hurt. And we also have another really cool action, which is called Let the Kids Fly, where we are going to empower previously disadvantaged kids, give them the gift of flight, and then start a selection process and select 3 of them over the course of a year and give them the training to become wind tunnel instructors.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this really cool stuff, you know, and it's a lot of work, and but it's definitely very, very worth it. And that's just a complete give project for us. It's taken a lot of time, and actually we've been very fortunate to have people who've helped us to get that started, because it actually takes quite a bit. But now we're at the point where that's gaining a bit of traction, and we have amazing people who've come on board and who're flying that flag for us.
You're a busy guy.
Yeah, it might sound a little bit busier than I am, but I've got stuff going on. And then something else that I would like to mention, you know, so touching on the humanitarian side of connecting our activity and flying, to a little bit more to the heart. And then at the same time that we founded the Carol Foundation, we started a tech company. So we have a tech startup right now, which we are just weeks away from launching that publicly and being able to disclose more about what we're doing. But I believe we have in our hands the technology that would change the face of the sport fundamentally.
That's a massive upfront promise.
It is. And,
now I'm excited.
Yeah, it's a big thing to say, but I'm pretty confident with what we have and what we've developed so far. And I'm just dying to put it out there and let everybody see what we're working on, because the evolution of our sport, I say these words a lot because I truly believe in it. And I think from my design background, I have that mindset. Like, the evolution of our sport has been a direct parallel road with the evolution of the equipment we use. Right. Much like we were speaking about your parents, our parents who were doing sport a long time ago, was more dangerous, but the equipment's much better. So for us to take the next leap in skydiving and many other sports, we have to have an integration of new technology that's going to help us to learn more, that could potentially teach us in a way that the human being can't, because we're limited to our thought process as being animals, different to machines. And very, very exciting times. And you know, one of the most positive things that came out of this whole lockdown moment is that everybody moved a little bit more to understand technology, and we've had a lot of time for us to wrap our heads around what we have, and we've actually been able to make some great progress there. So unfortunately, I can't really say much more than that, but I hope I've got you interested, because watch this space. We're just about to launch something that once again, I think will fundamentally change the face of the sport for now and the next at least 20, 30 years.
Yeah, you've got me hooked. And people can catch up with you on Instagram at will.penny_. Is there anywhere else that they can follow all these different projects?
Yeah, I would say go to Instagram. Like I'm using Facebook also, but definitely Instagram. I like the more visual side of things, as that's something I'm interested in. So I don't really like to speak too much. I like to let the images show you really what's going on, and then give a bit of a description there. So if you would like to stay in tune with what's going on and the projects that are associated to myself and my partners, yeah, follow me on Instagram, and we've got some really cool stuff coming up in the next few months.